As someone who has designed way too many roller coasters and No Limits 2, I am obsessed with roller coaster layouts. In most of my videos when talking about a coaster, I mention the layout of the coaster and the various elements that it goes through. But today I'm going to focus on one specific element of a coaster, and what you could argue is the most important element, the first drop. When you're first getting into coasters, this is the part that you look at and go,
"Oh crap, that is super tall,"
and wonder if you're going to get that floaty feeling in your stomach when going down the drop. It's the part that gets the coaster enthusiasts excited, unless it's a dive coaster, where in that case the coaster people are gonna complain about how boring the ride is or something like that. For me, the first drop is usually my favorite part of the ride, and today I'll be counting down the 15 best first drops that I've experienced. Now, I've ridden quite a few elite coasters, but there's a much longer list of coasters that I have yet to put on my coaster count. ElToro and Skyrush have first drops that are sure to knock your socks off. The massive 4D coasters have this super weird flippy first drop where you're facing straight down, and there are so many other coasters that are first drops that I would surely love, but I haven't had the chance to go out and take those for a spin. So at the end of the video, I'll make a prediction of what the top 10 first drops in the world are, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Number 15 is Mystic Timbers at Kings Island. Everyone talks about the awesome layout following the drop, but I've never heard anyone mention the drop itself. So I went into this coaster not expecting much from the drop, but this blew me away. I only rode in the back row for my 2 rides, so I don't know if it feels like this in any other part of the train, but it felt like the track was not banked nearly enough, so I was absolutely pinned to the right side of my seat for the entire time until the banking levels out and you head into that first airtime moment. The airtime is non-existent on the drop, but it's not like the rest of the ride is lacking in that department, because it's not, but the laterals are so unexpected and good on this drop, so it earns a spot on the list. Number 14 is Shockwave at Six Flags Over Texas. Now, I was not sure whether to include this or not because I've only ridden it once and it was when I was 9, so I don't really remember it much. But since I've technically ridden it, I'll include it. This drop has really weird shaping where it's not a very steep drop, but the radius of the crest never changes, so you get a good pop of airtime before abruptly getting some positive G's. This first drop is not the highlight of the ride. That would either go to the double loop or the drops in the second half, but it is pretty solid for a coaster of this age. Number 13 is Magnum XL200 at Cedar Point. This was the first ever coaster with a height over 200 feet, and while the drop isn't over that hypercoaster mark, it comes pretty close. This drop has some strange shaping as the track cresting the lift is pretty tight, but then you go into a pre-drop before the track finally drops down to that maximum angle of descent. In the back, you sort of come out of your seat over the crest of the lift because of how tight the crest is, but then you hit the pre-drop before you get a stronger pop of floater airtime and a nice stomach dropping feeling, butterflies as some people call it, which is sustained down the entire drop. It's not the greatest drop, but it's on the list due to its height. Gemini at Cedar Point takes the number 12 spot. This drop is nowhere near as tall as Magnum's, but it makes up for that with how it gets to that maximum angle much quicker than Magnum does, and you have a nice near-miss effect while dropping down. This drop gives a nice pop of ejected airtime when sitting in the back row, and the minimal lap bar also enhances the experience. Number 11 is Raptor at Cedar Point. In most seats, this drop is just average, but when you ride in the back row, far right seat, this first drop is awesome. The train crests the lift and heads into the pre-drop. The train whips to the left, and due to the banking and shaping of the track, when sitting in the back row, you actually start to float out of your seat a little bit. But then the track gets much steeper while the banking simultaneously levels out, pulling down the back right side of the train, which gives some awesome floater airtime and a great moment of butterflies. And because this is an older B&M inverted coaster, you will get some nice positive force at the bottom. 10 is Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point. After getting launched at 120 miles an hour and rising up the massive top hat, the train crawls over the element, giving an amazing view of Millennium Force's layout and Lake Erie behind it before you plummet back down to the ground. The track gets to the vertical angle of 90 degrees very quickly before performing a 270-degree spiral on the way down. Sitting in the front, you get this awesome visual of the twisting track beneath you before spiraling down, but in the back you get a nice pop of airtime into that comfortable T-bar restraint before getting a nice stomach dropping feeling as you twist your way back down to earth. It's not the best drop in terms of airtime, but the sheer height of this drop and the unique 270-degree spiral is what gets it this placement on the list. Number 9 is Wildfire at Silver Dollar City. Before even talking about the drop itself, I need to mention the awesome view of the Ozark Mountains to the left. Just wow. You crest the lift and turn to the left so that you are facing the nice view before dropping down. This drop has a pretty tight crest before a super drawn out transition to positive forces at the bottom. When you're sitting in the back, you get yonked over the drop for an amazing moment of ejector airtime that very slowly fades from ejector past floater and gradually starts giving you positives. Number 8 is Val Raven at Cedar Point. The main gimmick from the ride type notorious for being a one-trick pony is actually really good. You get an awesome view of the rest of Cedar Point as you spend a long time at the top of the lift hill, turning to the right and connecting with the holding brakes. I love riding this in the front row so I can just stare down this 90-degree drop from 223 feet in the air. The train hangs up there for a few seconds before dropping you down. There isn't any airtime on this drop unless you sit in the back, and maybe you'll get some, but I've heard that the airtime is way better on the dive coasters that featured the classic B&M over-the-shoulder restraints, but I'm satisfied with what Val Raven has to offer. The drop does give an amazing stomach dropping feeling all the way down, and it's definitely one of my favorite parts of any coaster. Number 7 is Outlaw Run at Silver Dollar City. Now, this drop gives a completely different experience depending on the row you sit in. When sitting in the back half of the train and not in the far back, you get a nice moment of ejector airtime all the way down the drop, as you would expect from an RMC. But if you sit in the far back row, you get a couple of weird hitches in the drop, where the airtime seems to abruptly get a little stronger. As I said in my video ranking the coasters at Silver Dollar City, it feels like a toned down version of how people describe the drop on Skyrush at Hershey Park. As long as you sit near the back, this drop slaps. Number 6 is Diamondback at Kings Island. What makes this drop so good is the staggered seating, making the trains super long. The shaping on this drop is pretty drawn out, but because of the very long trains, riders in the back get yanked over the top of the lift hill and down the drop for an awesome moment of airtime. I don't really know what else to say about this drop, it's just perfectly executed. Number 5 is Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. This RMC hybrid coaster boasts a drop of 200 feet taken at a 90-degree angle. This gives riders in the back of the train an amazing moment of ejector airtime, and a great stomach-dropping feeling to kick off the most airtime-filled coaster in the world. This is up there with my favorite elements on Steel Vengeance, which is saying a lot because this ride is stacked with standout elements. Number 4 is Maverick at Cedar Point. This drop is nowhere near as impressive as Steel Vengeance's in terms of height, but the maximum angle of 95 degrees on a 100-foot drop means that the radius of the drop's crest has to be super tight, resulting in some insane ejector airtime. You even have some speed going into the drop from the launch lift hill. Riders in the front dive face first towards the ground, and the steepness of the drop really enhances the illusion. But riders in the back get a super strong moment of sustained ejector airtime, and while the drop is over very quickly, the sheer strength of the airtime is what gets it this high placement on the list. 3 is Time Traveler at Silver Dollar City. This drop is by far the weirdest on the list. The height of the drop is not the best at only 90 feet, but the angle of 90 degrees and the spinning cars are what make this drop awesome. The train just rolls right out of the station and plunges down this drop. Because of the spinning cars, you get this drop sideways when sitting in the back, giving you ejector airtime, laterals, and a stomach-dropping feeling in this super unique experience. This drop is a perfect way to start off the ride. Number 2 is Millennium Force at Cedar Point. The world's first 300-foot drop is definitely one of the best out there. The crest of the drop is pretty drawn out, as well as the transition to positive force, but because of the 18-row trains, riders in the back get whipped over this drop for an amazing moment of ejector airtime, as well as some nice butterflies as it feels like you're just falling for so long. The airtime fades away and transitions to strong positive force as you head right into the overbank turn, an amazing way to kick off this speed-filled ride. Number 1 is Orion at Kings Island. This drop is the same exact height as Millennium Force, but the track shaping on the drop is what makes it better. The G-force transitions from the normal G-force of the lift hill to 0 Gs, and that happens fairly quickly, which makes the radius of the track pretty tight after the train exits the lift hill. Then that 0 gravity is sustained throughout the entire drop, before transitioning quickly to positive Gs at the bottom. So because of how tight the initial crest of the drop is, in the back row you get a pop of ejector airtime that transitions into floater airtime, which is sustained throughout the entire drop, making it feel like you're just falling forever before finally hitting the bottom of the drop. The reason this gets placed at number 1 is because of that feeling of floater airtime and butterflies that are sustained for so long. But there are also many awesome first drops that I've yet to experience. Of course, you have the other B&M Giga drops with Fury 325 and Leviathan, the drops that give you super strong airtime like Skyrush and El Toro. There are the massive twisted drops with Expedition G-Force, Karnan, Conda, and DC Rivals, the latter of which you can ride backwards. The massive 4D coasters have an insane face-first 200+ foot drop that looks like definitely one of the best out there. But here's my prediction for the top 10 best drops in the world. Number 10 is Dino Conda at China Dinosaurs Park. Number 9 is Ejunica at Fuji-Q Highland. 8 is Leviathan at Canada's Wonderland. 7 is Cannibal at Lagoon. 6 is The Ride to Happiness at Plopsaland. 5 is Skyrush at Hershey Park. 4 is Orion at Kings Island. 3 is Fury 325 at Carowinds. 2 is T-Express at Everland, and 1 is El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. That is just my prediction, so take it with a grain of salt. Let me know in the comments what your favorite first drop is, and make sure you're subscribed. I'll see you next time. Bye.